Politics are about narratives and managing the conversations. Leadership is about inspiring people, guiding their efforts, and correcting the course of projects and processes towards a desired goal or objective. In our society, we combine both with the hope that our elected officials and the people they employ will deliver desired results and be accountable. Dr. Anthony Fauci had a bad day in Congress, which in turn was a defining moment to show clear as day why any government cannot be trusted blindly. The once highly regarded infectious disease expert and America's top doctor has fallen from the limelight and become a controversial figure, all because of how he handled or mishandled the public's trust. There are still strong emotions by many around the COVID pandemic, as there really has not been much progress in holding anyone accountable for the pandemic in the eyes of the public. And there are many people who want answers behind the parts of the response that did not go right, went too far, or simply were lies. On the other side, there are people who will line up behind Fauci and defend his decisions and actions, especially many people who support broad vaccinations, support isolation, and masking and obsessive testing for anything and everything. There are people today who are still wearing masks, which we know never worked, and still ask every visitor to take a COVID test. Working in the healthcare industry during the pandemic response, I give Dr. Fauci leeway in the sense that there was a great level of hysteria, fear, and general lack of knowledge in the public. So there was a need to act in the greatest amount of caution possible, until more information came out. At that moment, there was little known and early information was not completely reliable. Health systems were struggling to determine the proper approach, relying on what was dictated from the state and the federal governments, even ones with leading infectious disease experts. In this kind of an event, you have to expect that there will be mistakes, course corrections, and lessons learned at each stage. People are not perfect, whether in government, academia, or the private sector. Everyone usually operates with the best intentions, making the best choices, using the best information and technology at the moment. The release of the notes Fauci made during the pandemic does not help his case and is a strong reason that he cannot be blindly given the benefit of the doubt. While we expect that mistakes may be made, we expect that people entrusted to be the point person on a critical response like this would be honest, accountable, and transparent. He clearly was not. The theme of the notes can be tied back to Fauci protecting his image and himself. The origin of the pandemic was heavily debated, and we now know that what so many got deplatformed for, censored, and attacked for was actually the truth. The clear and obvious answer was the truth. Rather, they wanted us to believe that people eating bats sparked a global pandemic. The controversy around the efficacy of masking, which he first was honest and upfront by telling people they do not need to mask, then turns around and calls for universal masking. At the time, people in health systems knew the masks were not foolproof and that the virus could penetrate based on what vendors stated, but it was better than nothing was the general mindset. A major issue also was that they essentially imprisoned society for what was supposed to be 2 weeks, but lasted far too long. All the while, prominent Democrats were dining and partying, while dispatching police to arrest anyone that left their homes or went to a store without masks. A great disparity on who actually had to follow the rules. For I think there is a mixed bag around Fauci. I am willing to give him credit for his work to help address the pandemic, but I think his lack of honesty and potential issues around the whole events cannot be overlooked. He clearly was not being forthright with the public during the public, not being accountable during the hearing, and did not think he had to. Arrogance of an unelected bureaucrat. The consequences goes beyond an undeserved presidential pardon, an uncooperative hearing, and the bloated ego of a career bureaucrat. There are people who hold strong distrust in our overall health infrastructure, many who no longer trust our vaccination protocols, and people who will now believe conspiracy theories more frequently because the biggest one turned out to be true.
For those on the left solidly defending Dr. Fauci, can we not all agree that the accusation that a global pandemic was started because of eating bats is a bit racist? You rather slander a whole group of people as eating flying rodents than admit that a lab where there might be some funding illegally sent to them leaked the virus. The origins around the pandemic do matter, as if there was some level of involvement externally. Then we should know to what extent did our taxpayer dollars go towards research that was done in another nation and why. Gain-of-function research may have its benefits with rational fears, but was it being done in a less regulated environment for a reason? The opportunity Fauci rejected was to show a bit of remorse for what turned out to be the wrong approach, the consequences forced on people, and what we could do differently in the future. He was already pardoned, and technically could not plead the fifth at that point. So he threw away the opportunity to shift focus towards the lessons learned and to show some goodwill by being accountable a bit. The biggest question we are not asking ourselves is how our society should address the power given to unelected bureaucrats who are not directly accountable to the public. We are seeing this play out not just with Fauci, but other powerful bureaucrats who have abused their power and seek shielding from justice. Every single person working for any government agency at any level should be directly accountable for following the law without any shadow of a doubt and face even higher scrutiny than the average citizen. The trust eroded in government is real. Many patients no longer want to be in a hospital environment, preferring ambulatory facilities or urgent care. Hospitals already have their issues, but many are now still haunted by stories from the pandemic. Decisions, made out of the best intentions or interests or made solely out of politics, have clouded the industry and the overall complex.
You cannot argue with science. That is a bold claim from a person that was supposed to help the public understand the science and what was going on. The worst educators are the ones that do not allow questions because either they do not know the answer or fear the truth. People should be allowed to question, and people with integrity should not fear a respectful debate. But, clearly there was a bit of ego during this time, where the press attention created the appearance that he was the most powerful person in the world. And that he had the complete attention of not just every American, but other nations that relied on America's stature as the global superpower of good. That is something that we forget, how our policy helps other nations as well. It is not a flaw in anyone to admit they made a mistake or that they realize a change in direction is appropriate. Situations, especially during the pandemic, are fluid and information should dictate response. The problem is when people are not wanting to move from the original point despite the change in information. Wanting to know more about what happened and improving our response is not a partisan thing. People believe that everything is either Republican or Democrat because we are conditioned to some degree by media coverage. But both would like to see a more balanced and reasonable approach in the future. We have missed that opportunity because Fauci once again needed to protect his name in his own mind. Except the whole event simply made him seem smaller. Would not be the case if he simply just was transparent and honest with the public. We need to be able to see things as they are, not through ideological, social, or cultural biases. To restore any level of trust, we need to be able to be told the facts, evaluate it, and accept or reject based on merits, not biased preferences of who or what benefits.
The biggest issue around the pandemic is the risk that it may have provided people with a blueprint of how to bully society in the future for political purposes. During this time, people let fear, hysteria, and lack of information be the reason to abandon personal choice, freedom, and control over their own bodies. All the while, the same people keeping you in place were dining out at private dinners, hosting each other in their homes even though there were limits on the number of people that should be in certain spaces. But the words of an unelected bureaucrat essentially imprisoned millions of Americans, while that bureaucrat dined with members of the media and others. This is essentially why people want to limit the power of government, because there is always the risk of a person using that power to do real harm. The best approach is to limit the power and allow the people to retain that decision-making and accountability for their own outcomes, which would lead to them making better decisions. But that is a discussion for the future. People, regardless of politics, should have an issue with the lack of honesty and integrity that existed, and a lot of that falls at the feet of Dr. Fauci. According to the diary and media reporting, Fauci seemed to have experienced a side effect from the vaccine that he touted as completely safe. Similarly, there are many people trying to sell us ideas and principles, like centralizing ownership of property, public means of operations, and shared community gardens, which are blatant lies as well. Have people seen the housing assigned to people in nations like Russia and China? Yes, housing is assigned in communist economies with no personal private ownership. Shared gardens would not feed a community, as gardens in themselves are not fully able to sustain a household, and people would take more than they help with. Eventually, the goods would be rationed, which will fall to meet the needs of the household. Conveniently, those in power and close to power will not face the same rations or restrictions. We should never be forced to abandon our choice, not in the face of adversity, nor in the face of exploitation by supposed Americans who have embraced the views and sympathize with the evil in the world.
The nature of our politics will not help improve trust in critical institutions. If these institutions act in a manner that is not in the best interest of the stakeholders and communicate appropriately and effectively, there will be many challenges facing our society. That will never change. Life happens and the world moves to the next cliff to climb. But we need to ensure that we are able to trust the information we are being told. That is hard because the fact-checkers are all too often part of the lie. The focus on management of the conversation rather than elevating the truth. We have seen it recently in New Jersey, where our new governor was not able to speak the truth to New Jersey residents without devolving into a partisan rant that showed that she is not an independent, accountable leader, but a pawn of the Democratic Party. That is what partisans do, not leaders. People should be able to trust in the people elected regardless of the political party affiliation. We should trust that our democracy can survive, free markets will prevail, and freedom and self-determination will be the norm. America needs leaders, and we need to recognize who is really providing quality and effective leadership and be able to call out when they are not.